What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's your boy Jay bringing us another 2023 NFL Round 1 mock draft. And for this one, it is going to be pretty standard. It's going to have a lot of interesting trades in it. I believe there are 3 trades, some that I've never mocked before, other interesting picks or players fall. Some of them go higher than expected. It's a pretty interesting mock draft. I haven't really done one like this before just because of some of the trades that I'm not really high on, but I decided to make it interesting and do them anyway. So it's a pretty interesting one. I am going to make my mock drafts a little more realistic. The last 2 I made were kind of a stretch, not really realistic. And basically what I want to do with these mock drafts is make them as unique as possible, but at the same time I want to make them realistic. And there is a fine line between unique and realistic mock drafts. So from here on out, they are going to be a little more realistic. I don't know if you guys watched the one I made on Sunday, Easter, but that one was pretty not realistic at all. And I know some of you guys were saying it wasn't really realistic at all. So from now on, they're going to still be unique. They're still going to be different. I'm going to try to make them different and entertaining to watch, not your standard mock drafts. But at the same time, I want to make them realistic and stuff that you could definitely see happening in the draft. So yeah, now that that's out of the way, let's just get to the video. And at pick number 1, we have the Carolina Panthers, and I know you all probably know I'm very high on them taking CJ Stroud at pick number 1. Now in the next couple of mock drafts I do, I'm definitely going to play around with them taking a different quarterback, maybe Anthony Richardson, Bryce Young, maybe even Will Levis, throw him in there at pick 1, just have fun and experiment with them. For this one, I am going to go CJ Stroud. I know it's probably getting a little repetitive since every mock draft I've done, they have taken CJ Stroud. I'm just very high on him, and I think that's one of the biggest locks to me of the draft. I know there is a chance they go Bryce Young, but to me, I'm just very high on CJ Stroud with Frank Reich. And I'm going to go CJ Stroud at 1. I'm going to go Bryce Young at 2. I know it's standard, but next mock draft, I'll play around with it and, maybe throw in a trade with the Texans, maybe, just experiment, have fun with it. So like I said, this one's going to be CJ Stroud at 1, Bryce Young at 2, but next couple mock drafts we'll have fun and we'll change it up a little bit. But I mean, honestly, I think the Panthers are more than happy with CJ Stroud. That's who they traded up to get. And then the Texans, if Bryce Young falls under them, that's totally fine. I think they would prefer CJ Stroud, but I mean, Bryce Young has a much higher ceiling and he is the overall better quarterback in my opinion. So I mean, they'll be fine with whoever they get. I don't think there's much complaining. So CJ Stroud at 1, Texans take Bryce Young at 2. Pick number 3, we have the Cardinals, and this has been a hot spot for teams to trade up with the Cardinals. And if I'm the Cardinals, I'm looking to definitely trade down a few spots. I think you're definitely rebuilding, and if I'm Jonathan Gannon, I see Jalen Carter on the board, I see Will Anderson on the board, and yes, it'd be great to have one of them, but I'm thinking if we can trade down a few spots, get some draft capital, and still have a shot. I mean, you look at the defensive front class, I mean, you could still have a shot at Jalen Carter if he falls, Tyree Wilson, Calijah Kancey. I mean, it's such a heavy defensive front class. I'm totally fine with trading down. So if I'm the Cardinals, I'm definitely looking to trade down with someone. Who is that team going to be? Now, I haven't been very high on many teams trading up. I haven't been high on the Falcons, the Titans, the Seahawks, the Lions. I haven't really been high on any of those teams trading up. I have the Raiders trading up in this one. Now, I'm not very high on it. I still think Jimmy G is their man for the next 2 years, but I am looking to the future with the Raiders, and I'm looking at the division. You have Justin Herbert, Russell Wilson, and Patrick Mahomes. You need a good quarterback. You need a freak athlete quarterback, and who is the freak athlete quarterback in this draft that's still on the board? Anthony Richardson. And you look at Jimmy Garoppolo's contract, it's a 3-year deal, but most of the money comes in the first 2 years, so I think we could see Jimmy G start the first 2 years, have Anthony Richardson sit behind him, and then at the end of the second year, you see Anthony Richardson take the helm, and Jimmy G is the second-string quarterback. I like that. I think he would be fully developed, and you just let Anthony Richardson go loose, who I think is an incredible quarterback, and I think under the right system, he is going to be a total freak athlete, freak of nature, and I think, like I said, I think the Raiders are a perfect team to develop him under Jimmy Garoppolo for 2 years, and I like it. So what exactly will the Raiders give up? I have them giving up their 7th overall and then the 38th overall, so a first and a second for the pick 3. Now, I don't think, if you're the Raiders, you still don't want to give up too much because this is a stacked class that you need help with. Not a stacked class, but you still need a lot of help on the defensive front and the secondary. So if I'm the Raiders, I'm looking up probably the 38th pick is what the Cardinals are going to want in return, as well as their 7th. I could see them giving up the 70th and around 2. But if I'm the Cardinals, I'm not budging with the trade unless I get an early second, which is what the Raiders have. So I like it. 7th and 38th for the 3rd. Raiders move up, and they take their guy, Anthony Richardson, who will sit behind Jimmy Garoppolo for probably 2 years, and then at the end of that second year, they let him go loose fully developed and just let him turn into the freak athlete and freak quarterback he has the potential to be. Now, if I'm the Colts at pick 4, I'm looking Anthony Richardson is off the board. I see Will Levis is on the board, and I have heard there have been a lot of talks that the Colts are highly interested in Will Levis, but I'm looking at another thing, and I'm looking at the AFC South, and if I'm Shane Steichen, I see that as a very winnable division if we can land a quarterback in a trade. The Jags are going to be very good. I'm not taking anything away from them, but if we can land a guy like Lamar Jackson, I think we have the potential to win that division. The Titans are going to be awful. The Texans are going to be heavily improved, but they're still not going to be very good. They're rebuilding in their first year. So if I'm the Colts and I'm Shane Steichen, I'm looking to win now and make an immediate impact in Indianapolis. So I'm going out and I'm trading for Lamar Jackson. I think having Will Levis would be nice, but I don't think you really want to take that year or two to develop him when in a year or two the Texans are going to be very good, the Jags are going to be very good. So I'm looking to win that division now and trade for Lamar Jackson. So I kind of messed up the trade last time, but this time they're giving up the 2024 and 2025 first rounders. And if I'm the Baltimore Ravens, I'm looking at it like this. If Anthony Richardson was on the board, I might want the 4th overall just so I can take him. He's not. I don't think they have much interest in Will Levis. So I'm looking with these 2 additional first rounders next year and in 2025. I look at the quarterback class in 2024, and it is an absolute stacked one. So I think the Ravens can use these 2 extra first rounders to trade up early in the 2024 class and take the quarterback of their choice. And in return, the Ravens trade away Lamar Jackson to the Colts. I like it. So the Colts get their quarterback in a win-now situation, and then the Ravens get 2024 and 2025 first rounders. I like it. Who do the Colts select now? They have Jalen Carter on the board. They have any defensive player they want. I could see them going with someone like Will Anderson to get some more explosive talent on the edge. I don't really think they go Jalen Carter. They don't need much help on the interior. And then if I'm Shane Steichen, I'm looking at his off-field issues as well. I think they go cornerback. They just lost Stephon Gilmore in free agency. Now, I like Kenny Moore. I think he's very underrated, and I hope he shines this year kind of as the cornerback 1. But I'm still looking to get someone on the outside who's big and physical. Kenny Moore plays primarily in the nickel and is pretty small. He's only 5'11", 5'10", I believe. I'm still looking to get that outside cornerback who's big, tall, and physical. I'm going to my cornerback 1 in Christian Gonzalez. Now, I would love to trade down here as well. I'm looking at teams that could potentially take interest. Now, if the Cardinals stayed at pick 3 and took a defensive player and Anthony Richardson was still on the board, I think there would definitely be a lot of trade value here at pick 4 for the for the Colts to trade down. I don't really see that as much with Will Levis, so I'm staying here at pick 4, and I'm taking the best cornerback in the class in Christian Gonzalez. And we have a great secondary now. Kenny Moore on the inside, and your big, physical, tall cornerback on the outside in Christian Gonzalez. Up next, we have Seattle, and they have any defensive front player available to them. Now, I think it will be interesting if Will Anderson is on the board. Like if this happened where, in this case, it wasn't even 4 quarterbacks, but the Colts took a cornerback over a defensive front player, and they have both Will Anderson and Jalen Carter on the board. Now, who are they looking at? I think if Will Anderson's there, there's a big shot they go there just because he is clearly the edge rusher 1. And I do think that interior D-line has improved some, and Uchenna Nwosu's contract is up after this year, I believe, so I think you could be looking to get a long-term replacement. And that's a tough one, man. It really comes down to who you like more and what you think you need help more, and I think they need help on the edge. And again, I like Jalen Carter. I think if Will Anderson wasn't on the board, it's a no-brainer. I don't think they care about his off-field issues too much. The Seahawks have taken gambles on players before with off-the-field issues. For this one, though, we'll make it interesting, and they go Will Anderson Jr. because he's on the board. Now, I do think they desperately need help on the interior. And I do think, too, you look at this edge class, I think you can look at someone like Miles Murphy, Felix Enudike-Uzama, I think I said that right, Will McDonald at pick 20, because they do have pick 20, and I think there is a lot more edge depth than defensive line depth. But I'm looking, Calijah Kancey could still be on the board, Mazi Smith, Bryan Bresee. So if I'm the Seahawks, for this one now, I don't know what they would do if it really came down to Jalen Carter or Will Anderson. For this one, though, I think they just need that player who's explosive, who can get to the quarterback, who's explosive off the edge. I think they need that, and I think they find that in Will Anderson. Now, I do seriously think they need help on the interior just as much as they need help on the edge, but I think the off-field issues, now, again, like I said, I think the off-field issues are a mute issue for the Seahawks, but I think you're just comparing and contrasting these two in Jalen Carter and Will Anderson. They're both freak athletes. You both need help on the interior and on the edge. So I think you're just going to look at the negatives, and I think you say, well, Will Anderson doesn't have off-the-field issues. We might as well go with him just because of that. I mean, that's my logic. He's the cleaner guy off the field. He doesn't have any issues. That's I mean, that's seriously how I'm looking at it. But I mean, it could go down to Jalen Carter. It just depends. For this one, like I said, though, we'll keep it interesting. And I think this is realistic. I mean, again, I'm very high on Jalen Carter to the Seahawks, but I've never really done a mock draft where it comes down to him or Will Anderson, and it could very well go Jalen Carter over Will Anderson. For this one, though, like I said, we'll go Will Anderson and just get the clear edge rusher one in the class, explosive, and I like Will Anderson. I think he would be a good fit in Seattle. I don't know. It's a tough one. It's just a toss-up. It comes down to what you think the Seahawks would prefer more. At pick number 6, we have the Lions, and this is an interesting one because Jalen Carter is still on the board. He's still on the board, and he's available to the Lions, who desperately need help on the defensive front and especially on the interior. But to me, I think Dan Campbell would love to have a guy like Jalen Carter, but to me, I look at Dan Campbell, and he's not the coach to take a chance on a player with off-the-field issues, and I look at the team and the atmosphere he's building in Detroit. Jalen Carter just, to me, doesn't fit that because of the off-field issues. He does not seem like the type of coach who wants to take a bet on a guy. And especially with the severity of Jalen Carter's off-field issues, he doesn't seem like he's the type of coach to want to take a bet on something like that. So I'm looking now at a guy like Devin Witherspoon. You could beef up and upgrade that secondary even more. It has upgraded a ton over the offseason free agency. I also look at a guy like Tyree Wilson, explosive off the edge. And to me, that's where I'm leaning. You do desperately need help on the edge and the defensive front. Tyree Wilson, who is my edge rusher too, he's explosive and very fast. He has incredibly high upside, in my opinion. And that's the direction I'm going. I think at pick 18, you can focus more on cornerbacks. You can look at someone like Joey Porter or Deonte Banks, who I'm pretty high up on the fact that they'd still be there at pick 18. So I like Tyree Wilson to the Lions. Again, I see Jalen Carter there, and I see they desperately need help on the interior, but just Dan Campbell and that Lions team don't seem like the organization that want to take a bet or a gamble on someone with off-the-field issues. And it sucks because he's a great player, and they would desperately need someone like him, but just the off-field issues to me are too much for Dan Campbell to take a risk on. Up next, we have the Cardinals. And if I'm the Cardinals, this is a dream situation. You got an early second and 38, so you now have the 34th and the 38th overall pick, 2 early seconds. You traded down, and you still have Jalen Carter available. Now, Jonathan Gannon, mind you, is a defensive-minded head coach. He was the defensive coordinator at Philadelphia, and I know Jalen Carter has off-field issues, but to me, and I don't know a whole lot about Jonathan Gannon, but if I'm Jonathan Gannon and I'm a defensive-minded coach coming from Philadelphia, I understand the value of defensive front players like crazy, and I see Jalen Carter on the board at pick 7. I'm willing to take a bet. Yes, Devin Witherspoon is still on the board. You could go someone like Deonte Banks or Joey Porter. You could go someone on the edge like Lucas Van Ness. I'm also looking at Nolan Smith, who I would really love. But to me, I just see Jalen Carter on the board at pick 7, and he's just too good to pass up on, especially if I'm Jonathan Gannon, who, the Eagles value pass rushers and defensive front players like crazy. I just cannot pass up on Jalen Carter, the best defensive player at pick 7, still available. So Jalen Carter at pick 7. I could see them going Jalen Carter at pick 3 as well. I think it's an underrated pick that not a lot of people have mocked them to. They need help on the interior just as bad as they need help on the edge. And again, I know he has the off-field issues, but if I'm Jonathan Gannon and I'm willing to overlook the off-field issues with Jalen Carter, I think he's a no-brainer at pick 3. Or if they trade down to pick, 7 or kind of early in the top 10, I think he's a no-brainer if he's still on the board. Up next, we have the Atlanta Falcons, and this is an interesting one. Not a lot of defensive front talent that you would like. I think you would love to get someone like Tyree Wilson if he's available. Jalen Carter just fell at pick 7. So I'm looking at Devin Witherspoon. I like him. He's still available. I think you could definitely use another cornerback behind AJ Terrell. I'm looking at the edge rushers. They desperately need help on that defensive front, especially on the edge. And I'm looking at Nolan Smith. I really like Nolan Smith, especially to Atlanta. There have been talks they want to keep him in Georgia. I'm looking at Lucas Van Ness. I like Lucas Van Ness. He's a big guy, 6'5", 272 pounds. And to me, that is what the Falcons need. I look at Nolan Smith. He's 6'2", which I like Nolan Smith again. I think he's a freak athlete, had one of the best combines this year. But I just like Lucas Van Ness. His sheer size and just strength and physicality is something they desperately need on that defensive front. So I'm going Lucas Van Ness with pick 8. And again, I could see them going Nolan Smith. I like them trading down here too. I think it'd be great if they could. I don't really see a team wanting to trade up like that has a lot of value. But again, I like Lucas Van Ness. I think if you're the Falcons, you're perfectly fine with taking him at pick 8. Again, he's just so big and physical and just explosive, and that's exactly what you need on your defensive front. Up next, we have the Bears, and I know there have been mocks. They could go someone like Calijah Kancey. They could go on the edge. Whoopsie. They could go with someone like Bryan Bresee, Nolan Smith. They could focus on the defensive front. To me, though, your biggest need, without a doubt, is getting an offensive tackle to protect Justin Fields, and I like Paris Johnson. He's my offensive tackle 1. He's a big physical tackle. He can play left tackle and hold down Justin Fields' blind side. He can also be kicked into guard if need be, which I don't think he probably will. I think he's going to play primarily left tackle. But again, I mean, look at him, 6'6", 313 pounds. He's huge, and I think he's exactly what that offensive line needs. He's very versatile, and I like Paris Johnson. I like him too. The Bears to protect Justin Fields. Up next at pick 10, we have the Philadelphia Eagles, and I'm very high on the fact that I think they will trade this pick away. I think it's exactly what you're looking to do if you're Philadelphia. You're looking to find a player who has great value and find a team that wants to trade up with you and get him. Who's on the board right now? Will Levis is on the board, and I don't know if I said it or not, but I have 4 quarterbacks going in the top 10 in this mock draft. We're at the 10th overall pick, so who's going to trade up and get Will Levis? It is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I had them doing this in my last mock draft, I believe, as well, and I think there is a chance Will Levis could fall to them at pick 19. I did a mock draft like that a couple weeks ago. I didn't upload it or anything, but I had a mock draft where Will Levis fell. I could see that happening as well. It's Will Levis, you really don't know. He could go in, the top 5. He could fall all the way to the Buccaneers. He could go past the Bucs. Who knows? In this one, though, they're going to trade up with the Eagles at pick 10 to take him. I have them giving up just a 1-2 punch, 19 and 50 overall for the 10th. Maybe like a later 150, 175-ish, but for this one, just a 1-2, 19, 50 for the pick 10. And they trade it, and up at pick 10, they go with Will Levis. And I like the fit. I like the idea of it. It's kind of like what I said in a different mock draft. Not in this one, but in this mock draft with the Raiders trading it for Anthony Richardson. You get Anthony Richardson. In this case, you get Will Levis. He sits behind Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield's contract's only for a year, so I like the idea that you get Baker Mayfield, who, is not great. I don't think he's anywhere near as good as Jimmy Garoppolo is, but he's a starter. He's not a veteran, but he's experienced. He's going to be a good mentor to Will Levis if they can land him, and, he'll sit on the bench for a year, developing under Baker Mayfield, and next year take the helm at quarterback. And I like it. I think it's one of those situations where having a developmental quarterback is ideal. Because again, I'm not very high on a lot of teams trading up in this draft to get a developmental quarterback, but the Buccaneers, I think, are a perfect team to do that. They need to find a quarterback in the long term. Baker Mayfield's not going to be there after this upcoming season, so I think Will Levis is the perfect answer to that question. Up next, we have the Titans, and I know this one has been pretty basic as well. I've had them going Peter Skoronski in every mock draft, I believe, and this one is no different. Probably next mock draft, I'll change it up, have them going with like a wide receiver or something, but in this one, I'm very high on Peter Skoronski just because of how versatile he can play. He can play tackle, but he would also be a very good guard. He can even play center. He can play just about any position on the O-line. And again, I like the idea that they go receiver here. You have Jaxon Smith-Njigba. You have Quentin Johnston available. You have any receiver you want. But I've said it in every mock draft, and I'll say it again. It doesn't matter who your quarterback is and who your receiving core is if you don't have a good O-line. And right now, I'm looking at that offensive line, and it is one of the worst in football. Now, the interesting thing with Peter Skoronski is there has been a lot of talk that he's too small to play tackle, and that he will probably just get kicked into guard. And that is one thing to consider. Do you want someone who can play primarily like tackle, like Broderick Jones? I would look at Broderick Jones as well, and Anton Harrison to replace that left tackle in Taylor Lewan, who just left. And this one, I will change who they go with in tackle because, again, I like Peter Skoronski, but I think he's probably going to stick to guard more in the NFL. I'm looking at someone who can play tackle and primarily left tackle, and I'm looking at Anton Harrison or Broderick Jones, both great left tackles. I'm taking Broderick Jones. I'm very high on him. He can also play right tackle if he needs to, if they want to rotate him around on that offensive line. He can't really play guard, but I don't think that's as big of a need right now. I think you just want to get someone who can protect left tackle, and whether it's Malik Willis or Ryan Tannehill, protect their blind side. And I mean, Broderick Jones is great. He's a staple piece at tackle, so I like him. And again, I could see them going Peter Skoronski just because of the versatility, but I would rather get someone to pick 11 who can play primarily tackle, which there has been a lot of talk, like I said, that Peter Skoronski will play primarily guard. I would rather just get a primary tackle, and Broderick Jones, who can play left tackle as well as right tackle, so I like Broderick Jones to the Titans at pick 11. Pick number 12, we have the Texans, and I'm looking at receivers here. I could also see them going with someone like Calijah Kancey, or look at the edge rushers and focus on the defensive front now that you got your quarterback. And I could see that. It's a very possibility, especially with DeMeco Ryans, who's a defensive-minded head coach. The thing I'm looking at, though, is you want to get Bryce Young at least one true weapon. I think they have John Mechie, who he's coming off of an injury. I think he's going to have a great year, especially with him reuniting with his old teammate in Bryce Young. But I still want to get another receiver, and I'm looking at Jaxon Smith-Njigba, my receiver one out of Ohio State. I absolutely love him. Great route runner. Doesn't have the sheer speed you would look for, but he has great hands. He's so elusive, and the thing about him is he's very versatile. He plays primarily in the slot, but you can also kick him out wide if you need to. So I like Jaxon Smith-Njigba. He's coming off of that injury. I don't think that's really going to slow him down. I love him, and I love him to the Texans. I think he's perfect for Bryce Young, and I could see them going with someone like Quentin Johnston. He's kind of a more alpha receiver, bigger, but to me, I think you just want to get someone who is kind of a safety blanket, who is a smooth route runner and has great hands, and I think Jaxon Smith-Njigba is the best receiver in this class. Next up at pick 13, we have the Jets, and this is an interesting one. I think they do go ahead and get Aaron Rodgers, but in this one, I don't think they give up the 13th overall pick. It's clear they really don't want to, so we'll say Aaron Rodgers for their 2 seconds, their 42nd and 43rd, and then we'll also say a round 3 in 2024 for Aaron Rodgers. It's very clear that they don't want to give up their first rounder. And now who do they get with their first rounder at pick 13? I think you're looking at offensive tackles here. And I'm looking, Peter Skoronski is still on the board, and I like him. I like Anton Harrison. I think if you can get someone to play left tackle, you have Michael Becton at right tackle, get a left tackle. I like Anton Harrison. But I like Peter Skoronski to the Jets. I don't think I've mocked him to the Jets yet, but I like him. He can play guard. Like we just talked about it with the Titans. He's very versatile, can play guard. He probably can play tackle. It just, depending on his size and his arm length, he might have to just play guard. But I think you can try him at left tackle. And if he doesn't pan out at left tackle, you can just kick him into the guard because he is going to be a very good guard, I feel like, if he doesn't play tackle. So you want to protect Aaron Rodgers as much as possible, and getting a versatile offensive lineman in Peter Skoronski, I think, is the best way to do that. Up next is the New England Patriots, and I've said it before, I hate being a fan of the Patriots on draft night because you never know who they're going to take. They always think differently than most teams. They never go with the obvious answer. And this one is going to be a little more obvious now. Looking at the board, I think cornerback is a big need. Devin Witherspoon is on the board. I think he would be a great addition to the secondary. Joey Porter, another guy who I think, if they're going to go cornerback, I think it'd be Joey Porter. He just seems to be exactly what Bill looks for in a cornerback. He's just very smart, and Bill seems to kind of favor smart, smooth corners above anything else. I think you can also look at Brian Branch. He's still on the board. They do need another safety with Devin McCourty retiring. I think if Brian Branch is on the board at pick 14, I think I would not be surprised at all if they did go with Brian Branch. And I like Brian Branch. To me, though, I'm looking, and I still think receiver is one of the biggest needs on this team. Even though the Patriots landed Juju Smith-Schuster, hopefully Tyquan Thornton can develop in year 2. I still think, and even if we get a guy like DeAndre Hopkins or Jerry Jeudy, I still think we need to add one more great receiver on this receiving team to kind of develop. And I'm looking at the receiving core now. I am high on Quentin Johnston, but I think I need to be high on him to get in the right system. And to me, he would not fit the Patriots system very well. I look at a guy, I like Zay Flowers. The only thing with him is I'm kind of thinking Tyquan Thornton can be that Zay Flowers, both kind of small guys, very fast, kind of deep threat type players, limited to the outside. I kind of see Tyquan Thornton in the Zay Flowers, and I'm very high on Tyquan Thornton. I hope he can develop in year 2. I'm looking at a guy like Jordan Addison. He's very smooth. He's a great route runner. He can be a deep threat. He's a freak athlete. And even right here, it just says he's a crafty route runner with the kind of bend to run a full route tree. That's exactly what the Patriots need. They need a crafty route runner, someone who's smooth, he's fast, can be a deep threat. He's very versatile. I really like Jordan Addison to the Patriots. And that's what I'm going to have them going with. I think it's an underrated pick. Now, do I think they would go that way in the actual draft? Probably not. It just doesn't seem like the Patriots' MO, but you never know. And I think if Jordan Addison is on the board, which I'm pretty sure he will be at pick 14, I think he'd be a great pickup. I think, like the first look said, and people know, he's a great route runner. He's versatile. He can play slot. You can kick him out wide. I mean, he can do whatever. And I think on a Patriots receiving core that's kind of lacking that one true wide receiver one, I think Jordan Addison can be that wide receiver one if you give him some time. So I like Jordan Addison there at pick 14 to the Patriots. Up next, at pick 15, we have the Packers, and I've mocked them to take tight end, and mainly Dalton Kincaid a lot in these mock drafts at pick 15. Not in this one, though, so they traded away Aaron Rodgers. He's gone. I do think it's important to get Jordan Love as many weapons as possible, but I'm looking later to the second, third, even fourth round. There's still very good depth at the tight end position. So I'm not super high on them taking one. I mean, again, I've mocked it to them a bunch, and I am high on them taking Dalton Kincaid. But at the same time, I do think there are some good points that other people have said where you can just wait till like the second or third round and get a guy like Sam Laporta, who Iowa produces some of the best tight ends in the country. Luke Musgrave. I mean, there's a lot of good tight ends there that are going to be available in the second and third round that I'm looking to wait on. I'm also looking now, if I'm not going tight end, I'm looking at that interior defensive front, and I see Calijah Kancey on the board. And I like Calijah Kancey. He has great first step quickness. He's not the biggest guy. He's only 6 foot. But he's a great play disruptor, and he's a great pass rusher. I think gives him time to develop, and I think he can be a good run stopper as well. And that's what I think they need is just a disruptor on the defensive front who has quick step explosiveness. And I think Calijah Kancey brings exactly that. And I like him at pick 15 to the Packers. They had a very bad run defense last season, and I think he kind of makes an immediate impact at the defensive front. Again, it might take him a year or two to develop, but give him some time, and I think he is going to morph into a great defensive tackle for the Packers. Up next at pick 16, I already mocked it, but I have the Commanders going Devin Witherspoon. I think if he's still on the board, it's a no-brainer. I think that would be a dream come true if they can land him, and you're in a division where you need a lockdown secondary. Their secondary is pretty bad last year. I believe it finished like bottom 23, I believe, so they definitely need to upgrade it, and I think Devin Witherspoon upgrades it just that. He's not the biggest cornerback in the world, but he's very physical, very tough, very hard-hitting cornerback. And, I think you're able to overlook the 5'11 size when, he brings so much to the table and just the physicality. So I like Devin Witherspoon. I could also see them go on someone like, Darnell Wright, maybe get a long-term tackle who's versatile. Could go someone like O'Cyrus Torrence to protect Sam Howell, but I like Devin Witherspoon and kind of locking down that secondary. Up next at pick 17, we have the Steelers, and there's two ways I'm looking at this. I'm looking at either the cornerbacks here, and I see Joey Porter on the board. I really think that'd be a good fit. His dad was a linebacker for the Steelers. Deonte Banks on the board. I really like Deonte Banks as well. I'm very high on him. I'm also looking at offensive tackles. I think you really need one more solid tackle to kind of solidify that O-line and protecting Kenny Pickett. And to me, that's where I want to go at pick 17 if I'm the Steelers. I see Darnell Wright on the board, and I think a lot of people forget this, but in 2021, he played left tackle. He can play left tackle just as much as he can play right tackle, and I think that's perfect. I think when you get a tackle who's versatile, who can play left and right tackle, that's perfect. And, this even says his tape against Alabama's Will Anderson was outstanding. He's a lockdown. Basically, my point is he's a great tackle, versatile, 6'5", 330 pounds. That's exactly what you're looking for. And you really need to protect Kenny Pickett and that offense. And that's exactly what they're going to do in getting Darnell Wright. I really like it. And again, I could see them going secondary. I could see them going with a guy like Joey Porter or Deonte Banks. But to me, I think protecting Kenny Pickett and hoping to have him have a breakout second year, you need to protect him in order for that to happen, and I think Darnell Wright's the perfect answer for that. Up next at pick 18, we have the Lions, and I think there's two ways you can go. You can either look at the cornerbacks here, or you can flip the script and go offense. I think if they do look at the offense, you're going for a tight end here. Both Dalton Kincaid and Michael Mayer are still available, and this is an interesting one because I look at the cornerbacks here. I look at the depth in the corners, and Deonte Banks still on the board. I like Joey Porter. I like him a little more than Deonte Banks just because he's a little bit taller and he's a very smart cornerback. But if I'm the Lions, I believe I did a mock draft video where they took a tight end. I think it was Michael Mayer. And I have them going tight end again. I like Dalton Kincaid to the Lions at pick 18. They traded away TJ Hawkinson, and it's nothing against Brock Wright or their other tight end. I forgot his name. Who is their other tight end? Brock Wright's their main tight end. And it's nothing against him. They have one other guy, like Shane Zylstra or something. Anyways, nothing against their tight ends, but they really need that good, explosive receiving threat tight end. And I think they find that in Dalton Kincaid. That offense is very good. I think it's going to be very underrated going into this year. I think that offense is going to surprise a lot of people at just how good it is. You're getting Jameson Williams healthy, Amon-Ra St. Brown. That O-line is very good. It's very underrated. Jared Goff is a good quarterback, and I don't really get all the people where they say they should trade up to get a quarterback. I think if you can get a good tight end to solidify that offense is going to be one of the best in the league. And again, you could go secondary. I think they've just upgraded that secondary enough to where you can wait till like the second or third round, especially with the depth at cornerbacks here. I think you can definitely wait till the second, third round to upgrade the secondary. I really like Kincaid, and that's who we're going to go with. I think he's underrated as a blocker. I think he has high upside in the blocking game. Great receiving threat, great hands, great route runner, great speed. and you add an elusive guy like Kincaid to that offense, and that is going to be one of the best offenses in the league. Trust me on that. At pick 19, I already mocked it on accident, but I have the Eagles going Nolan Smith. I could see them going to someone like Bryan Branch. I think they need another safety, and Bryan Branch there at pick 19. I think that's intriguing. If you guys forgot, we traded down with the Buccaneers so they could get Will Levis. Anyways, I like Nolan Smith, though, just because that defensive front is such a key part of that Eagles defense, and I look at Brandon Graham, who has had a great career with the Eagles. He is getting old, though. He's 35. He's not going to be there much longer. I think Nolan Smith is the perfect guy you take in, let him develop for a year or two under Brandon Graham. And, Nolan Smith is a freak of an athlete. He's not super big. He's 6'2", 238 pounds, but he's a freak athlete. And you kind of let him develop with Brandon Graham, and he's going to be an amazing edge rusher one day. And I really like him. And, the Eagles are very high on their edge rushers. They're very high on their pass rushers and defensive front. So, to me, it makes sense, especially at pick 19, Nolan Smith, one of the best edge rushers in the class, that if he's still there, I think he'd be a no-brainer for the Eagles. Up next, we have the Seahawks at pick 20. And if you guys forgot, we did not go Jalen Carter at pick 5. He was on the board, but we went Will Anderson just to make it interesting. And I do think that is a possibility. I think they do need help on the edge. And they went Will Anderson at pick 5. So now at pick 20, I am looking at that defensive line interior. And I like Bryan Bresee. He's 6'5", 300 pounds. And I really like him. I think he's a great player. He is a good run defensive lineman. And that's exactly what the Seahawks need. They need someone on the interior who can stop the run. Their run defense finished 30th, I believe, last year. It was pretty horrible. And I think Bryan Bresee is an instant impact player for the Seahawks and that interior. So Bryan Bresee at pick 20 to the Seahawks. At pick 21, we have the Chargers, and this is an interesting one because I've mocked them to take a cornerback, mainly Deonte Banks here at pick 21. Joey Porter's still on the board as well, and I do think they need another cornerback. Outside of that, I do not see a lot of value here. I know Quentin Johnston on the board, and I don't think they need a receiver, especially at pick 21. If you want to get a younger receiver to invest in later down the line, maybe like pick 54, 85 in the second, third, maybe fourth round, you can look at receivers. I don't think it's worth spending your 21st overall pick on that because their receiving core, it's aging a little bit, but I don't think that's what you want to spend your 21st overall pick on. So if I'm the Chargers, I'm looking to trade down here. And I'm trying to find a team that would be willing to trade up for a guy that's still on the board. And I think the Eagles do 2 trades. They trade with both their 10th and 31st picks in this draft. Or excuse me, 30th overall pick, not the 31st. And the Eagles love to trade up in drafts. They love to trade in drafts. They traded down earlier from pick 10 to 19. The Eagles, I believe, there's a statistic I saw that they've traded up in the last 3 of the 4 drafts. And not mock drafts, like actual in the last 4 years. 3 of those drafts, the Eagles have traded up, and I think they do that in this one as well. They traded down originally at pick 10 to 19. I think with their 30th overall pick, they trade up with the Chargers, and you'll find out who they go for in a second. Now, are they going to give up their 30th and the 50th? I think they give up their 30th and their 62nd. They have the 50th from Tampa, so I think you give up your 30th and your 62nd overall for the 21st overall pick. And if I'm the Chargers, I like it. You get the 30th, which is a late first rounder, and then you also get a 62nd. And I like it. I think if I'm the Chargers, again, I don't see much pick value for the Chargers at 21. So I think trading down and getting some capital is a win-win for both teams. Force the trade. Who did the Eagles trade up to get? I think they traded up to get safety Bryan Branch. They didn't go with him at pick 19, which was a bit of a gamble because they do need another safety, in my opinion. I think they traded up, and I don't see Bryan Branch surpassing a team like the Jags, the Giants. I think the Bills could even take a shot at a long-term safety. I think there is a very good chance he falls before pick 30. And the Eagles know that. They want to be aggressive. The Eagles are very aggressive in the draft. Howie Roseman is very aggressive in the drafts, and I think he's aggressive right here. He trades up 9 spots with the Chargers to go with Bryan Branch to replace C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Up next at 22, we have the Ravens, and if you guys forgot, we traded away Lamar Jackson. Now, we didn't get the 4th overall pick. We got the 2024 and 2025 first rounders instead, so we don't have Lamar Jackson anymore. So who are we going to go with? Now, they did sign Odell Beckham Jr., I believe, 2 days ago, but to me, that was a very overrated signing. They paid him $15 million guaranteed for a 1-year deal, and that's not going to serve their long-term problem at receiving core. It's not going to fix anything, long-term. So I think you're still looking to find that long-term receiver. Quentin Johnston still on the board, Zay Flowers. Both of them are very kind of appealing options at pick 22 if I'm the Ravens. But to me, I'm looking at the secondary. I think we know our offense is going to be terrible this next year. You lost Lamar Jackson. You even with Odell Beckham Jr., you still have a very weak receiving core. And I'm looking at Deonte Banks versus Joey Porter. And I like Joey Porter a little more just because he's smarter and he's taller. Deonte Banks is 6 foot straight, I believe. 6 foot, yeah, 6 foot flat. Joey Porter's 6'2". Joey Porter is just a smart player. He's so smooth and just so fluid. And that's who I think John Harbaugh kind of looks for in a cornerback. And I like Joey Porter to the Ravens. And again, I see Quentin Johnston on the board. I see, Zay Flowers is on the board, and I think that's all very appealing. But if I'm the Ravens, I'm looking at the defense. I think you just need to accept the fact that that offense is not going to be good this year. And again, I do think they need a long-term receiver, at least 1 or 2 receivers. But to me, I think you spend your 22nd pick, especially with, Deonte Banks and Joey Porter still on the board and still such good cornerbacks available to you. I think taking Joey Porter at 22 is the better move over taking a receiver. Next at pick 23, we have the Vikings. And this is an interesting one because they lost Adam Thielen, which I think was probably one of their biggest losses, if I'm being honest. They really don't have any receiver depth besides Justin Jefferson. So I'm looking at the receiving core, and I see Quentin Johnston still on the board. And I like Quentin Johnston. He's big, he's tall, he's physical. He's not the best at contested catches, doesn't have the best hands, and he's kind of a messy route runner. But, you give him time to develop as that wide receiver too in Minnesota, and I think he is going to be a beast. And you do need to desperately look at the defense. You are lacking cornerback depth, you're lacking defensive front depth, you're lacking pretty much everything on defense. But to me, I'm looking and I see Quentin Johnston on the board at pick 23, still available. You need a wide receiver too. And, Quentin Johnston is one of those receivers where he's a freak athlete. You just give him time to develop. And I think he's going to be a great receiver. I think he'll be a great wide receiver too under Justin Jefferson. And you keep up that power, strong offense and the receiving core. Up next at pick 24, we have the Jaguars. Now, this is an interesting one. I think there's a very good shot they go someone on the offensive line. Rather, it's a guy like Broderick Jones for right tackle, Anton Harrison for left tackle, O'Cyrus Torrence, who can play left and right guard. They need to kind of help improve that O-line. That was not really talked about last year, but it was pretty bad. I also look at Deonte Banks, though, and he's not the biggest cornerback in the world, but he's very fast, very physical, great tackler, and that's who I think they really need right now is another cornerback. That secondary was okay. It's a very young secondary. I think if you can get Deonte Banks, that would really help it, and that's where we're going to go for this one again. I could see them going someone like Anton Harrison, get some help on that O-line to protect Trevor Lawrence, but I think Deonte Banks at pick 24 is too good to pass up on, and you kind of help solidify that secondary. Up next at pick 25, we have the Giants, and that offense has upgraded a lot. You see Zay Flowers is still on the board. I think it would be nice to get someone like him who's kind of a speedy, deep threat. I think you also look at the secondary. I like Cam Smith. They really need a cornerback too behind Adoree Jackson. I think safety, you can also look at safeties, but there's not really any good safeties. I think the only one you can take a bet on in the first round is Brian Branch. If he's there, which he's not, Eagles took him at 19. So I like them going cornerback here. I like Cam Smith. He's not very big or tall. He's only 6'1", 180 pounds, I believe. Yeah. But he's very smart, high football IQ, great tackler, very physical. And I like Cam Smith, big hitter. And that's really what they need. Again, they could go safety. They lost Julian Love, but again, there's not much safety depth here at pick 1 or in the round 1. So I like Cam Smith. I think they need a cornerback too, and Cam Smith is one of my more underrated cornerbacks in this class. And I like Cam Smith. I think he's a big hitter, and he's kind of what the Giants need for a cornerback too. Up next at pick 26, we have the Cowboys. Now, Bijan is still on the board. I think that's the obvious way they go, but you look at tight ends. They lost Dalton Schultz in free agency, and I see Michael Mayer still on the board. And I think Michael Mayer is a great tight end, great run blocking tight end, great hands, great contested catch rate. So it kind of comes down to which do you want, and it's a tough one because Bijan Robinson, I think, is generational talent, but at the same time, getting Michael Mayer is another great weapon for Dak Prescott to utilize. For this one, though, we're going Bijan Robinson. In fact, in one of my mock drafts, I had them trading up with the Patriots to take him. I think if Bijan's there at pick 26, it doesn't matter who else is on the board. I think Bijan's kind of the no-brainer. And again, it would be nice to take someone like Michael Mayer, but as I said earlier, I think there's much more tight end depth in the later rounds. You look at someone like Bijan Robinson, he's really the only standout running back. And, I think Jahmyr Gibbs is great. I like Tank Bigsby as well. But, Bijan Robinson is so much far ahead and so much better than any of these other running backs in the class. Whereas you look at the tight ends and, I like Michael Mayer, but I think you get a lot of good value out of a guy like Sam Laporta or Luke Musgrave in the later rounds. So I like Bijan Robinson to the Cowboys at pick 26. Up next, at pick 27, we have the Bills, and I'm looking at two main things. I'm looking at cornerbacks. Now, really not many cornerbacks left. I'm not very high on Emmanuel Forbes just because he's 6'1", 166 pounds. He's a very kind of small guy. And I know Cam Smith isn't much bigger, but Cam Smith is such a good tackler. Emmanuel Forbes kind of struggled with tackling last year. So if I'm the Bills, I think I'm waiting till the second, third, maybe fourth round to look at cornerbacks. I'm looking at inside offensive linemen. That O-line was horrible last year, and it wasn't something that really got talked about a lot. I like O'Cyrus Torrence, the best guard in the class by far. Didn't allow a single sack or quarterback hit last year, and I think he's the way to go. He can play left guard as well as right guard, and you need that when your offensive line is struggling. I also could see them going Myles Murphy. That defensive front is getting kind of old, and you pair him with Von Miller. I would like that. I think that'd be a very good lethal edge rusher duo, but for this one, I think you need to address the offensive needs at the O-line, and I think O'Cyrus Torrence is perfect for that. Up next, we have the Bengals, and I think there's two main ways you look at it. You look at tight ends, and you look at the interior defensive line. I like Mazi Smith, and I like Michael Mayer. Both are freak athletes, and both are desperately needed for the Bengals. I like Michael Mayer, though, at pick 28. They lost Hayden Hurst this offseason. They did sign Irv Smith, who I think Irv Smith is very underrated, and when he can be healthy, he's a great tight end, but I think you still want Michael Mayer. He is a great blocking tight end, great contested catch rate, great hands, and I think he would fit that Bengals offense perfectly. And again, I like Mazi Smith. I think you desperately need help on the edge, but I think Michael Mayer being there at pick 28 is just, it's too hard to pass up on. Up next is the Saints, and I already picked it. They go Mazi Smith. I think it comes down to two things. Do you go with Mazi Smith and address that interior D-line that needs a lot of help, or do you go with something like Myles Murphy or Will McDonald and address the aging, edge-rushing kind of defensive front? I like Mazi Smith. He's a tank. He's 6'3", 320 pounds, and I think that's exactly what they're looking for, just someone who can make an immediate impact at the defensive front on the interior. Again, you could go with someone like Myles Murphy just because that defensive edge is aging, but I like Mazi Smith and getting some immediate impact and help on the interior. Up next is the Chargers, and they traded down with the Eagles from pick 21 to pick 30. Who do they go with at pick 30? You're looking at cornerbacks. Again, there's not much cornerback depth here at pick 30 available. I'm looking at interior, and again, there's not a lot of interior D-line help. I'm looking maybe at receivers. Zay Flowers is there. I'm looking, you could go with an edge rusher. I don't really think they need to. It's tough. I think, you could go tight end. And really, again, there's not a lot of value here for the Chargers at pick 30. But you traded down, you got draft capital. I'm looking at Zay Flowers. Again, I'm pretty sure I even said, I don't think it's their biggest need at pick 21. But I'm looking, you traded down, you got draft capital. Really, I don't see anyone else worth taking a shot on. Again, there's not much help on the interior. You could look at a linebacker. You could go like someone Jack Campbell, but to me, I think Zay Flowers is there at pick 30. And again, you don't desperately need a receiver, but I think Zay Flowers would be nice to have, that true deep threat. You pair him up with a guy like Mike Williams. I think that would be a good outside receiver duo and get Justin Herbert another weapon. So we'll go Zay Flowers. Again, it's not incredible value at pick 30, but I think, he would be nice. He would be nice to have, and he's there at pick 30. You might as well take him. Get a young receiver who can be explosive and just be a great deep threat, which I like at pick 30 to the Chargers. And again, it's kind of a bummer. I could honestly see them trading down again if there's not really any value there, unless they wanted to go Zay Flowers. But in the real draft, if they do trade down, I could see them trading down again to get even more capital because I don't really see much value there at pick 30 for them. Up next, we have the Chiefs at the final pick in round 1. Now, I think it's between the offensive tackle position and a wide receiver position, and more specifically, Josh Downs or Anton Harrison. You need to replace Orlando Brown at left tackle, and you need to replace Juju Smith-Schuster at slot. Now, Josh Downs or Anton Harrison. That's really what it comes down to me. Do you want to get your long-term left tackle or a good slot receiver in Josh Downs? Now, I like Josh Downs. There's only two main problems. One, he's only 5'9", 170 pounds. That is tiny. That is not very big at all. And the only other problem I see with him is he's mainly going to be limited to the slot. I don't think he will be able to kick out wide and play outside receiver much at all, which will kind of limit him in an explosive Chiefs offense that is always kind of changing and evolving. So that is one thing. I really like Anton Harrison here. I really like him. He's 6'4", 315 pounds, a massive tackle who can play left tackle and plug-and-play guy, make an immediate impact at left tackle and replace Orlando Brown. And if I'm the Chiefs, I'm looking at last year. You traded away Tyreek Hill. Everyone thought your receiving core was going to suck, which on paper it did suck. I mean, it really was a bunch of nobodies. I mean, you had Juju Smith-Schuster, who was your wide receiver one, but it worked. And so if I'm the Chiefs, I think I'm willing to bet that we try to redo that again since we just lost Juju Smith-Schuster. And you look and wait till like the second or third round to address the receiver position, especially when you look at the receivers that are going to be available in like the second, third round. Cedric Tillman, Jalen Hyatt, Rasheed Rice, Nathaniel Dell, a lot of great wide receiver talent in the later rounds. So if I'm the Chiefs, I'm looking to find an immediate replacement for Orlando Brown. And I think you find that in Anton Harrison. Again, he's a massive dude, 315 pounds, 6'4", and I think that's more important than getting your receiver right now, especially how well they did last year with not a very strong receiving core. I think if I'm Andy Reid, I'm willing to bet and try that out again. And so Anton Harrison to pick 31 to the Chiefs. Yeah, there you guys have it. That is my round 1 mock draft 4.0, I believe. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It was pretty interesting. A lot of weird trades. The Colts went Christian Gonzalez at 4 after getting Lamar Jackson. Jalen Carter fell all the way to 7 at the at the Cardinals. They traded down with the Raiders. Raiders jumped up and got Anthony Richardson at 3. Jalen Carter fell at 7 to the Cardinals. The Falcons went Lucas Van Ness at pick 8. The Bucks traded up with the Eagles, with the Eagles to go Will Levis. Patriots went Jordan Addison. I think that was an underrated pick. Calijah Kancey to the Packers. Chargers traded down with the Eagles. The Eagles traded up at 1 and then traded down with their second pick. They traded up for Brian Branch, and the Chargers took Zay Flowers to pick 30 when they traded down. Pretty interesting mock draft. And again, I try to make this one a little more realistic because I know some of you guys were saying the last one wasn't. And again, I looked back at that mock draft and it wasn't very realistic at all. So I apologize for that. I'm going to try to make them more realistic in the future. I want to keep making them unique though and making them different, but at the same time making them realistic. So I hope you guys liked this one. If you didn't, comment down below why. Comment down below what you disagreed with. Comment down below what you agreed with. And yeah, I hope you guys liked the video. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe. I'm going to be getting a lot more mock drafts out, a lot more draft coverage, a lot of free agency news, and all that good stuff. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys so much for watching. It's been my boy, Jay Lay, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out, everybody.